Alright, I want to do this video on these Ford oil pressure gauges one more time. My last one had a bit of ranting in it, and it was a little confusing. I made it pretty fast, I understand that. So I'm going to clarify everything right now. What we've got here is a somewhere between 92 and 97 gauge cluster. I believe it was a 94, maybe 93. Anyhow, that's not important. They all work the same way. Even the 87 to 91s, granted, they look different. There are a few different things on them. There's some discrepancies here, but this oil pressure gauge works the same way on all of them. The earlier 80s may actually have a different setup. That's before they went to this idiot light with a needle on it. We have people all the time. I see them on the internet everywhere, you know, and they're talking about my oil's at the N, it's at the O. It dropped over here past the end. You started the truck. This switch came up. Or excuse me, this gauge came up. That means that you have oil pressure. And here's why. This is a switch. It closes. There's a discrepancy on that. The best number I found is 3 psi. That seems to be pretty consistent with most of these things. This closes. Okay. When you crank it up, there's a resistor back here on the back of this cluster, I'll show you in a minute, that makes that needle sit right there in the middle. Okay, so when it gets over here, the only way for this gauge to move, the only way, is that this switch closes. If it sits down here and it doesn't do anything and you have an engine light on, I'd sweat that a little bit. I'd look further into it. Chances are, bad switch. If it's been running, it's been doing that for a while. If you drove it home an hour with no oil pressure, yeah, you got a bad switch. Your engine will let you know that you have no oil pressure in short order. But this kind of deal here, over here, whatever, it's all just this circuit. And here it is. We have our oil pressure gauge down to a switch, and this is the Ford electrical vacuum troubleshooting manual. I've had this for quite a while. It's been a big help to get these Ford dealer manuals. I have several of them. They really help out. Alright, so we had this 20 ohm resistor. That's what I was talking about there. We flip the gauge cluster over. It's right there. Now that impedes the voltage. Your 12 volts coming in, so that when it grounds, it sits right in the middle. Now, switch. Not to be confused with the sending unit. I believe I ordered this for an 85 F250 or Mustang or something like that. The older ones actually had these. Your bullnose Ford trucks. Your, pre-80s. I haven't dealt a whole lot with them, but from what I've seen and the few I've fooled with and what I've read and what I've ordered parts for, you won't have this problem. If you're having that problem on one of those and you look like you have low oil pressure, still could be the sending unit, but you need to look at it. I'd be more worried on one of those than I would on one of these. And what we have, all too often, it's just dirty connection. This little post will get dirty. Your terminal will get dirty. I learned this trick from owning a Lincoln Mark 7. These little things here will get dirty. Hit those with a pencil eraser, and you can look at them. You can see them when they get that way. Check that out. This resistor can fail. Cause that thing to do all kinds of wacky stuff. There's a few write-ups online I've seen of people taking this cluster out, replacing this resistor. They don't touch the switch or anything, and that gauge sits right in the middle. But guess what? That tells you nothing. So like I said, it's a switch. Closes at 3 psi. We're not reading anything here. And if you're worried about your oil pressure, get yourself a real gauge. That's the only way to do it. There's a way to make this gauge move with your actual oil pressure. And that's why I actually have this sending unit. This one's a cheap piece of China junk. It doesn't work very well. That's why it's in here and not on my truck. But I have a nice one on there. And what you do is you just bypass that resistor on the back that I just showed you. You can bypass that. Put a piece of wire across it, solder it. There's also a little spot right here. You can drop a blob of solder across that. Bypass that resistor with whatever means you want to. And when you use that sending unit, this gauge will actually follow your engine speed. It'll be up higher when the engine's cold, and when it warms up, it'll go down, just like it's supposed to, just like a gauge should. But as you can see, as we all know, there's no numbers there, so that's not really the most accurate way to do it. But in that case, it gives you a better indicator. You know, if you had a sending unit and you were running here, and all of a sudden, you know, you're down here, yeah, you might have a problem. And that would be an actual indicator. But as far as the factory stock setup, this gauge is an idiot light with a needle on it. It is worthless. It has a switch. And we'll look at that one more time. That's just what it is. A way to check this, what you can do, and typically, in my experience, it's usually not the switch that's worn out. It's dirty, it's messed up, whatever. You clean it up, clean the connections like I was talking about a minute ago. And it'll be fine. It's not to say that you won't start building some resistance inside of it, because I know there's a seal in there. You know, it's however these things are constructed. I haven't been too concerned with it because I don't like them. But you may wind up having to replace that. That may be what fixes the issue. If it's really filthy and you replace it, you're going to get a clean connection. It's going to fix the issue. You can take the wire that goes on this stud, and this will rule out whether it's this switch or not. You can take that wire, clean the end of it, the little clip wire that goes on here, and then you want to ground that to the block somewhere. You know, get you a alligator clip test lead, whatever, put it on a good ground, cut the key on, don't start the engine, and that gauge will sit right there in the middle if everything is right past this switch. You know, if you hook the switch back up and it's still stupid, then yes, by all means, replace the switch. But if it's not, then you need to look elsewhere. And that's pretty much all there is to it. I may have missed something. I made a video earlier about it, and I was catching some flack about this thing being a sending unit, not a switch. And I wanted to clarify that for everybody. I may even delete the old video. Seems it was confusing. So, there's your circuit right there. And I believe this wire color, the white with a red tracer there, I think that's pretty consistent for most of the 92 to 97 stuff anyway. I'm not going to swear to that. But that's it. That's how it works. They've been doing that for years. For whatever reason, I've always been told it was because the customers were coming back to the shop wanting them fixed because of the low oil pressure. Well, when the engine warms up, an actual sending unit, well, you know, it's going to sit low. You're going to have low-looking oil pressure, and then when you get to moving, it's going to raise back up again because, well, that's how an engine works. But people didn't understand that. I guess the world wasn't ready for real gauges, and they did away with them. But once again, don't worry. Unless you start that truck, and it sits here like this, and it doesn't go anywhere. Then you might want to cut it off, or you might want to listen, see what you hear, because it's going to start telling you that there's no oil pressure very quickly. You know, diagnose it from there. But if it's sitting here and that doesn't bother you, I'd just leave it alone, to be honest with you, because doesn't matter. It's not really telling you anything. But if it bugs you, it bugs a lot of people. It bugged me for a while. Diagnose it. Check it out. Check those connections. And that's really all there is to it. But this is not an actual oil pressure gauge. It's a idiot light in disguise. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.